welcome to this conversation. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
And today we had a lovely time, a convocation today for Pilani campus. I think the audience, going by the applause decibel level, and all of us on stage, I loved it, I know. The exciting narratives and the stories you shared is extremely inspiring and really something I never experienced. First time I met you, and I hope we will have several meetings in future in whatever form or whatever location. So just wanted to have a few discussions. You have been working on alternative pedagogy, particularly in school level. We know the results, we discussed that today also. There is a absolutely clear focus on alternative pedagogy in everything that you have done, whether it's in HIAL or SECMOL and other ventures. You always looked at breaking the existing framework so that immediate returns for the people, for the stakeholders, there is benefit, and there is a fair opportunity for the individuals in their assessment process, not a cruel system, borrowing that word, where the actual potential of the individual doesn't come out. And we have seen it time and again. So can this alternative pedagogy, can it be transitioned to a more mainstream education? I know the experiment has been extraordinarily successful in Ladakh. So has there been any attempt, or is there any hope that we can see some of the learnings from this, if not the entire framework immediately, that can be dovetailed into mainstream education, maybe for the entire country or to several states? Let's think about the school level first. I'll talk about higher education a little later.
So what it is that in Ladakh our work has been mostly with those who failed in their normal schools at the 10th grade level.
Yeah.
And there we saw that some of these students are not good with theoretical maths and physics and so on.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't even call it alternative. I would call it more natural, real learning, what we try to do. Things change, what may look like alternative may become mainstream, and that's what I would wish. So where we draw our inspiration to try something different to these students who didn't learn from the way they were taught, so we thought we better start teaching the way they learn. And it to me appears that for millennia, since the evolution of human race, our young ones never learned sitting in a classroom memorizing texts or formulae. They actually learned what they needed to learn in the field, outdoors, working with people who know better and imitating or learning from them. And that is why I suppose human young ones are blessed and gifted with so much energy. Sometimes we see people restless. To me, it looks as if that's the gift that nature gave them to go out and do things and learn. It's a package of learning software that nature has packed into you. Because as hunter-gatherers, our young ones went out in the wild. In the face of dangers, they would be shoulder to shoulder with grown-ups and learn that way. As settled farmers later, also they would learn their things from the field with grown-ups. So nature adapted itself and packed these young ones with lots of energy. And today suddenly we put them in classrooms with notebooks and pens and make them memorize, which is actually not the natural way. And when you make these people bubbling with energy to sit quietly for hours, this energy comes out in ugly forms like teenager rage and rebellion. So to do something that is in tune with nature is logical. And therefore what we try is that they go out and apply what they have learned. Okay, we have to teach them things that our forefathers didn't know, but it should have some application. so that they can see how it is used.
Learn by doing, by practice.
Memorizing trigonometric ratios just for themselves doesn't mean much unless they apply it and can predict.
I'm thinking of this, something we actually practice in this country very closely. You think of, let's say, classical music training, Hindustani classical or Carnatic. There is this Guru Shishya Parampara where, of course, there is a curricular structure, etc., some theory, some writing exams, but most of like by singing, by practicing, and the Guru kind of hands over, and it's normally not a large class. But I suppose there has to be some thought on how to translate this. This is a general philosophy that you are saying. But I guess in an urban setting, in formal education, there has to be a component of this. I remember, overseas in early classes, like class 1 to 5, etc. I have seen, personal experience with my daughter in a different country like New Zealand. So there you don't have so many books and stuff at all. But you do things, whole lot of painting, whole lot of doing things, and with all kinds of devices and props and all that. So there is a room where even today's formal education does practice this. There are some examples. I guess there has to be a good amount of work. How like today a CBSE curriculum, there has to be some elements of without sacrificing substance and stuff. I suppose there is more work to do. But
so I would like to just give you some examples.
Sure.
To teach children civics and how the political system works, sitting in a classroom and then making them, follow some rules led by teachers, to me doesn't make sense. For example, if you make the children elect their little government and take care of the class and the school and have a system whereby the student leaders run the school, help in running the school, they would more understand how elections are conducted, how governments are formed, and how responsibilities are done.
Gets embedded.
So that's where they could apply what they learn from the books.
Absolutely.
And that's not really a rocket science or an alternative of that kind. Similarly, if you learn about volume, area, you could have a school garden where you could use these to see the area of the garden bed and the volume of water needed by the bed, which is area multiplied by the height of water. All such things should be linked to things that they actually do. True. And then they could be providing, say, vegetables for the school lunch. So practical application and contextual application of knowledge.
So in the second query I had was how well have students from such alternative setups such as SECMOL or the other one, alternative one, they transition to traditional higher education framework. Some of them do transition to the formal framework that may not be so perfect, but that does exist, and that's what we follow. So how has that been? Has there been a difficult transition or dovetailing for people coming out of this system into, because you are doing in the school, can they get into higher education, a reasonable number? I know many of them are gone into all kinds of profession, not the formal academic track that we always talk about.
Well, generally applying knowledge to practical things or learning through all the senses rather than just listening and memorizing is more helpful than just reading, writing, memorizing. So it definitely doesn't hurt. It gives you much more depth. So therefore, yes, people who have learnt the experiential way are not less but more able to also do well in theoretical things, because they know, not because it is a formula that the teacher told, but because this is how nature works.
Ultimately, the formula has to be applied to a real device, a physical device and system. The question we were discussing just a while back. So I see I have two parts in this. I see that you yourself studied in a government system, higher education in NIT. We all have, and then I see this is a very unique, striking feature in how, when I was trying to understand what you have done, that you have worked and changed the government school system, not creating a parallel non-government. So that has value in the sense that that will have an impact over the entire state, and you exactly did that. Was more difficult, I'm sure, but ultimately the impact was much, it's a multiplier effect. And you talked about it, that when you change the people will demand a leadership which is different from what it is today. The policy is different from what it is today. So, but then in our country, the government education system, for example, today we are in Pilani. Pilani is a unique example of a non-government system which gives fair opportunity, completely merit-based, and there is no parallel admission process, etc., etc. It's very transparent. And so, is there something in the non-government academic system that you have? So this is for the higher education part I'm talking about. I'm not asking about the school part. So in the higher education part, the non-government options, have you looked at it, and did you get an opportunity, and do you have any observation on that? Because higher education non-government institutes, they have various models. BITS is one kind of model. There are also other models, as you probably are aware of. Because today the government can do so much. I think to expand the capacity, engineering the private participation has been huge, but not all the models are that pretty.
I think more for early education, like primary, secondary, school level, it is very, very important that government system is robust and everyone gets an equal opportunity. Yeah? What disturbs me is more than higher education, that the early school education is so vastly different. Non-governmental or private schools are so different from government schools in the interiors. This is dangerous, and therefore government schools should be very high quality, and perhaps, if you ask me, it should be only government schools, because equality cannot be ensured by other systems which are based on income, private, commerce, and so on. To me, basic education is like air and water. It should be the same for rich, for poor. Basic education. Now, after that, higher education, I think, is not essential. It is good to have higher education, but people can do so many things without higher education. So I'm not so concerned. Now, there you can have other players who have more efficiency in doing certain things. Therefore, it can add to the variety. So I don't mind, as long as they do not make it into a complete business.
That's right. It should be a not-for-profit venture.
Yes, I feel somehow education and health should be left as a service rather than a commerce.
Let's go into the higher education thing. Moving away from I don't know how much attention you can pay with your extraordinarily busy schedule, what you do. Do you see the landscape of higher education in this country? Not necessarily science and technology only. Well, we are dealing with science and technology here, but then there are various models. There has been some, I see that in some interesting non-government initiatives in humanities and liberal arts, interesting institutions are getting set up, which was not there 20 years ago. That sort of thing. So, do you see any change in the landscape? Is there anything we can expect from your pedagogic insights? What could be happening to higher education in India? Not necessarily only in the government sector. Government is creating more IITs, more NITs, but the demand for number of seats and opportunities is huge in this country. Do you see any almost looking into the future kind of variance?
So the best way to predict the future is to create it. Yeah?
That's correct. Absolutely.
I don't see a lot of change if things are left to themselves. And that is true not just for India. Globally, I find higher education in a very sad state. You have just one solution for almost every situation. Whether it is cold deserts of Ladakh or Siberia or Mongolia, or coastal Kerala or Spain, or rainy Cherrapunji or hot desert of Rajasthan. We just give the same education to all.
One
as
size fits all.
as one dose for every malady, which is not how life is. Higher education should be to prepare you to solve the problems of the context, of the region. So, firstly, I think higher education should be contextual, preparing people for a certain context where they can help solve the problems. Secondly, it should be practical. And these two, contextual or experiential, it's not happening in most parts of the world. Now, I feel India stands in a very good position. We have almost all the climates of the world. I mean, rather than just opening IITs here, there, everywhere and making them identical, I would think that if you have an IIT in the mountains, like IIT Mandi, should become the world's best in mountain ecosystems and mountain solutions, so that it specializes to the level that Swiss and the Rockies students come there to understand what they could do best in the mountains. Similarly, an IIT in Rajasthan should specialize in how in the desert ecosystem you could
one in
have
Jodhpur,
solutions. Yes. So that's where I think when you talk of institutes of eminence, I really feel that India should have institutes of eminence in different contexts which are world leading, rather than just adding to the
the generic model.
Yes,
Mandi is trying to become another IIT Kharagpur or Bombay or Delhi.
Yes. And I was surprised that in some of these institutes, hardly any locals come. Even if it is in the mountains, they have students from Bangalore and Kerala, and
it's an admission process.
Yes, so those things need to be relooked, and we have to see what is our malady and design the solution. Treatment accordingly. So this is one thing I see happening. I mean,
continuing on that thread, I was wondering, so what is it? So BITS Pilani, as you said, is no different from that model in many ways, because we have the competitive admission process. So ultimately it's an Indian institute. It doesn't matter which branch of BITS Pilani, which campus of BITS Pilani we are talking about. Ultimately it's a national input, from all over the country, various states. Whether any local contextual focus is set up, I think that's something we can look into. BITS Pilani campus is in a particular part of India which has certain specific and characteristics which is quite different from everywhere else. So have we focused on the desert technology, so to speak? I don't think so to the extent, no. It is still trying to address all the problems of India sitting in Rajasthan.
See, the 20th and 19th century were a time of industrial boom, industrial revolution of the past, where people thought there is unlimited production and you can do what you like on this planet. We are now realizing that's not the case. So life in future will become more localized, more sensitive to the ecological needs and so on, and therefore such kind of ecologically diagnosed and directed education will help people live simply and happily, so that other beings simply live.
That's a beautiful thought, and I think we need to do that. If you had any opportunity, I almost love this conversation. Policymakers, do they ever consult you, national education policy, for example, or MHRD or UGC or AICT? The regulators and the policymakers, and normally do they sort of borrow your time and wisdom?
To some extent, but not to a large, and that's because governments take cognizance of things that people take cognizance of. If the people of a nation are mature, they'll demand changes, and then the government will be compelled to find people who can help change things. So therefore I don't blame the government. I think we the people of the nation have to be more far-sighted. Okay, in 21st century this and this is happening, but what about 22nd century? And accordingly create our own future, and then demand from government things that would be more wise for a happier future.
Closer to home, continuing on that, BITS Pilani, I find that we have brought in formal in the curricular structure, more practice-oriented contents, like it's it's very uncommon in this country that one has 7.5 months of industry immersion. 2 months in one phase and then 5.5 months later, which actually takes away time from the lecture content. Because one full semester in the they study for 7 semesters in a classroom, and one semester had to be spent on that part of that 5.5 months. It has yielded results. I think Bitsians do things differently, and when you do a longish internship, sort of hands-on, do engineering, I call it, that gives you an opportunity to work on real life problems rather than a theoretical concocted problem because you are visiting a company for a short time, etc.
Exactly.
I think this element is good, but then as you pointed out, there are lots of, particularly the contextual part. I take that. There is so much more one can do to make it a contextual focus of the institute to the local problems specific to that region. That part, India is a fairly large country. You can focus on regional problems. But again, there is this pullback because of this competition that I have to compete with these other national institutes. Everybody is ranked on a, again, a straight-jacketed approach. Is ranking and all that stuff is quite often.
First of all, I'm very impressed that you have so much of industrial immersion and so on.
Going on for many decades.
Yes. Perhaps if you also have immersions of application in the campus itself, for example, the students could be outsourced many of the things. They could manage their say the food system or some of the governance system, or apply some of their learnings in nearby villages where you can have projects to hands-on actually improve lives. And I'm sure with the industrial immersion and things on campus that are hands-on,
social immersion,
industry who employ them will perhaps that they have a better knack of getting things done. And even if rankings I don't think should go down because of this, but to see that these people are better able to handle things will boost up their employability and desirability, and therefore finally help them in placements also if they show a marked difference.
So social immersion you talked about, that it does happen today. It's not compulsorily that all the students go out, and so there is this under NSS scheme. There is a bit of it, and also voluntary. I think we mentioned some of it during the convocation address. The director mentioned some of the social outreach programs there. So technology intervened solution of common social problems, society problems, societal engineering in a way. That does happen, but if we can bring it into the mainstream curriculum, just like we have done for the industry immersion, that all of them will participate in some form or other, I think it will gather momentum in a different way, and maybe it starts here and then other institutes will follow suit. That this force multiplier effect can happen.
But I'll add one of the problems I see in many of these high-end technology institutes, IITs, BITs, that teachers have problems of teaching the students is, first of all, professors in IITs, not necessarily here, have told me that we cannot do much because the students are not interested. They come to the class not wanting to learn, so how can you teach?
Right.
And I was saying this is more because you are attracting the wrong people and not getting the right people with the right aptitude for the course.
Right.
And perhaps that is because the selection system is such that it can be cracked by anybody who is mechanically prepared to tick objective type questions.
The clever.
Yes, and it has become a status symbol, a brand to come from a BITS or an IIT. So all the wrong people who have no interest in engineering, just want that label so they get some job somewhere, and the true engineers who have everything in them but may not have this polished English or the mechanical training of solving these may be left somewhere else and may be forced to become a soldier or an artist, whereas they are the true engineers, and some artists may be pushed into engineering. So could an institute start by changing the way the selection process happens? And I was suggesting that right now it is all tick marks, objective type. It's true, it is easy, mechanical, and therefore not a lot of effort goes, but you have to invest some effort to get the right kind of people. So could you put some element of experiential testimony that the student is truly interested in engineering to test that out? Now people tell me, if you have something hands-on to do in the test, it's so many you're dealing with, lakhs of people, how can you manage?
Scale of operation.
Yes, scale is a problem. But still I would say that if you keep a random question that every 1,000th student gets, where it's not just a tick mark, where you have to go in a lab and prove that you have opened a compressor or a clock or a refrigerator or something, because only those who have done such things would truly have the receptivity for engineering, which shows. And such people, when they come, they wouldn't want to bunk classes or create disturbances or just take the degree.
That's
I don't care that. So
Disinclined.
Something needs to be changed perhaps in the entrance system so that it attracts right kind of people. Secondly, I would say that
so that's basically, if I can put it in as a term, it's almost what you are suggesting is aptitude profiling, and then segmentation and screening based on that. To some extent, in spite of the huge number we are dealing with, some attempt, it has to be a solution which is not easy, but has to be done so that willing and inclined characters are in the classroom.
And you bring water. There won't be
in
commotion.
the IIT systems I have seen, because of my previous affiliation, somebody wants to do subject X in department X, but they are not good enough in the entrance exam, they got department Y. They will do department Y for 4 years just to get an IIT brand, but they all their life they want to become that X engineer, computer science possibly is an example. And in department Y, that is also a stream of engineering, you have almost the entire class which are not really interested in that career in Y,
Exactly, but
I'm saying X and Y just to not offend anyone.
I also question department X, just because there is money in it, or just because the society considered that
it's a
X is a great thing.
Importance.
How can you sell your own passion? You can't be mercenaries, hired soldiers. That's not respectable. If you have your own passion, why care about X even? Just because everybody else is swarming there. So people will have to be more self-confident enough to say that mine is not that path. It may bring money, it may bring opportunities, but my dreams, my strengths are different, and I would rather nurture them than to be a mercenary there.
That's correct. We do see some examples. Somebody graduating with a computer science degree is not choosing a computer science career.
Exactly. That's why I'm very surprised. I mean, if I wanted mechanical engineering, I wouldn't trade it for the world. If I have the top marks, I would, and mechanical is only 5th or 6th, I would choose what I want.
That's correct.
There is a problem in society that somebody who has engineering aptitude, for example, a child who opens a clock or the refrigerator, parents scold them and do not encourage. But if suddenly, say, BITS Pilani started an entrance system where somebody who has opened a clock gets a huge increment in marks, entrance test, then if there are random such questions, if you can't administer it to every applicant, then suddenly you will see an entire ecosystem change backwards from school, family, and so on. So suddenly schools will start helping them open clocks or machines or put together, Suddenly parents will not only not object to the opening of their clock, but they'll bring another and say, please do this, because yes, it may be in your exam for BITS Pilani. And these coaching systems that are mushrooming will suddenly start teaching people to explore and make and break things. So just by changing your entrance exam, you might change the whole ecosystem down to schools and coachings and so on. So something needs to be done of that kind, which then encourages young people to explore real things and also attracts those who have that in them to such institutes.
I mean, I'll coin this as a this phrase like bring in elements of do science, do engineering in our testing pattern and screening pattern.
And the reason why our children, our families don't care about how things work is because none of our exams test that. So therefore, we just eventually we end up becoming consumers of Western designs and products rather than creating our own.
Okay, this is such an exciting opportunity. The discussion can go on, and it's absolutely enriching and cerebral at the same time. I'm afraid we will have to bring this to a close. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It has been such an eye-opener, some of the ideas that have come through, and I hope we get to do this again. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
We'll meet soon, and with the hope that some of these thought processes do creep in to the policymakers' minds, and some of the frameworks, the academic frameworks, the pedagogic frameworks that we create for tomorrow's kids. And these are wonderful thoughts for a country like India, particularly. A couple of contextual is a very key word that Mrs. Sonam Wangchuk talked about. We also talked about profile screening or profile segmentation before somebody is admitted to a course, because then you have somebody who is itching to learn, is absolutely hungry for that knowledge and the technique and the technology and the science. So we'll have better classrooms, healthier classrooms, lively, more alive and kicking classrooms.
And happier teachers.
Happier teachers, and who are, we all prepare so well to teach a class, and then we see disgruntled and kind of uninclined faces, and many of them would not be even in the classroom. So that's not a very happy situation across the country in many institutes. So we'll have some solution. So we'll bring it to a close, folks. This is Sonam Wangchuk for you, the pedagogic thinker and the educationist who is completely orthogonal to the conventional. Thank you so much.